Good evening. As District Clerk, I'd like to call the Budget Committee meeting to order for April 21st, 2022. Could we start with the pledge?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome and congratulations to our new members, Mr. Anthony, Ken Anthony, Dan Guide, and Courtney Hewitt.
Yeah.
Is there a motion for a chair?
Yes, I would like to nominate Annie Collier.
I'll second. Second? All right, any discussion? Okay, congratulations, Annie.
Okay, well, thank you.
Just a point of order. Don't we have to at least vote?
The vote, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. All in favor? Thank you, sorry. I knew you were all like, yes.
We don't have a secretary. Will someone be good enough to take minutes for us today? I think what we ought to do is rotate it until and unless we have a secretary. I know last year Jim tried to take them at the same time. It's
Yeah.
tough to run a meeting.
It
that
is,
way.
yeah. I'll take some minutes.
Okay,
It'll
thank
be a
you.
little rough, but
Thank you. Rough is fine. And all you really have to have is kind of motions and major stuff.
Okay.
Kind of who's here and if a motion carried unanimously or not, that kind of thing.
so do I have to note for what we just voted on then, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And now we need to elect a vice chair. We have a nomination. I have a nomination.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I'd like to nominate Courtney.
All right.
I'll second. Oh. We're fighting today.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that'll be unanimous. Congratulations, Courtney. Would you like to change your seat here instead of
I got all comfy.
vice chair? Thank you.
Yeah.
What I'd really like to do, and tried this for the last couple of years, is to get the vice chair as fully involved in the whole process as possible so that she can become the future chair. I'd like her involved in all the meetings with the district, anything that she can come to. I just think, it'd be really good. We need to have our new folks get it up to speed as much as possible. So thank you, Courtney.
You need to switch your signs.
What?
Your signs, you need to switch them.
Oh, pass me my sign. I think mine's over there.
So it's the chair and vice chair,
Oh, this one? Oh, this one. Okay.
so we won't get a.
Look at this fancy.
Okay. It is the organizational meeting after all, so. Okay, so we have, Vanessa, thanks for printing those out, the
Yeah.
prior meeting minutes. Could we have a motion to adopt the prior meeting minutes?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, in a second.
Second.
Okay, Christine. Does anybody have any comments, suggestions, corrections?
No, they're pretty thorough.
Well, it was it was an unusual meeting, so I really wanted to have the detail in there.
Yeah,
It
it was so far away from me. I mean, I didn't, if
was a long time
yeah,
ago.
it was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago for me too. Okay, all in favor of accepting?
Do we vote if we weren't there?
Yes, you can, unless you see something that, if you see something that you're totally confused about or something like that, you can certainly abstain, but if you see nothing to object to, then absolutely.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Anybody, all in favor? That would be, we have all in favor, opposed, abstain. Okay, we have one abstention, so the rest in favor.
Just if I could, I would normally abstain because I wasn't here. But if the 4 people that weren't here abstained,
It wouldn't be a majority.
You wouldn't have.
well, I guess you'd still have a majority because you had three yes votes. So I guess I could have done that. Never mind.
So who
Which is why I asked.
That was a thought process.
Yeah.
Who seconded
Okay, what?
Who seconded that?
Yeah.
Christine did.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, it was almost a tie. Courtney and Christine.
Okay.
Okay, the school board report. Do you have a report to give us, Jamie?
Oh, God. What are we doing now? School board has been spending an awful lot of time on a couple of items that will probably dominate discussions. One is the professional development days, and that was adopted as having full days. And that calendar was adopted with the full days. I had gone back and forth numerous different times with numerous different sets of input. The other has been the strategic plan. And there's a lot of activity going around the strategic plan. That is still a work in process. There were a number of meetings following up from the last board meeting in which a number of board members had made some comments about what the next steps would be, and that there's been a lot of activity on that, numerous hours of meetings to try and refine that. There's still some work that needs to be done. Additionally, there's a lot of work that's been going on the math program. There's a reveal math program that's being used for the Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and geometry in high school. And there's a middle school math program that is being reviewed for the middle school 6th, 7th, and 8th. I was in the building most of this week going through those. Other people are scheduled to go through them at different times from the ISA committee, and then report that back to Superintendent Ambrose and Dr. Haynes. And that will be presented at the ISA meeting that's coming up on the 10th, I believe.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to, Vanessa, would you like to give us a report on the vacancy right now? It's not really on the agenda, but
Yeah, so we have one applicant, and because we prefer just to have additional applicants, I was just recommended that we reopen. So we have it reopened. We did get another applicant, which I'll share with Courtney and Ken, but right now it's open. People have to submit their letters of intent up until May 6th, and then we'll be running the interviews on May 12th.
great.
So, yep. So we did republish a new public notice. Phil had put it in the paper and on the website.
Okay,
So right now we have 2.
okay, great.
And then
Great.
we'll follow the process and make the announcement and share it with everybody, once the decision's made and all that good stuff.
Okay, and how because we won't be meeting again until mid-October, how will you make your announcement?
So I think the process that we wrote last year with Mary and Rick's
Mhm.
input was we were gonna put it on the website. So Phyllis is gonna post it to the website, and then I'll send an email to the budget committee. So everybody's aware as well.
Fabulous. Okay, okay.
I have a question, if I could.
Yeah.
Vanessa, does that work? I know on the school board, we actually did video of the interview process and then deliberated non-public and then came back and made an announcement. Does that work the same way? the
Yep,
budget?
yep, the same process, exactly. Yep.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Okay. So the next thing on our agenda is to set the goals and procedures for the coming year. So has anybody given any thought to goals? Do you have any input about goals?
I have a goal.
Okay. what's that?
Just for I think we'll have a lot of new members on the board this year. So my goal would be for like a training session for the new members so they understand the processes that we do. I'm a huge process fan. So my goal would be to get the new members trained properly, give them all the resources that they need up front.
Mhm.
I know Tom had mentioned that he'd be happy to show them around the building, have a meeting with him and Matt, just to do an introduction. So that's my goal, is to get that. I'd like to get that to be a normal process every year. So new members come aboard and they really learn everything inside and out.
I think that's great. I had, as a part of the procedures for the coming year that's on the agenda, I kind of made a few notes and checked in our Google Drive. Are you all familiar with Google Drive? Okay, so in your SAU Google account, there's Google Drive, and there's a shared drive, which is budget committee stuff from several years. So it's been posted there. All our Q&A, questions and answers on budgets are in there for years past. The budgets are in there. There's some other things. Can you turn on the screen for us, please? I just wanted to show you the Google Drive. In the, see, there's the secretary resume. We need to talk about the secretary, but see all these different years that are here. And we now have a new folder, planning for 23, 24. And agendas are posted in the agendas, and the minutes are posted in the minutes. And every time something's posted, you get an email to your SAU email address that tells you that there's something in the shared drive. So, you know, it's kind of a notification, just so everybody knows. You can, if you choose to forward your SAU to your own personal email, so you're not having to check the SAU and you're not missing one, you know, all the time, which is easy to do.
You want this light off or on?
Oh, no, on is fine. Yeah, on is, thank you.
Can I just make a correction? It doesn't send you a notification unless you set that up.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, so how do we set up getting a notification for Google Drive for something in the shared, that's posted in the shared?
Off the top of my head, I'm not 100% sure.
Okay.
I can look into it and let you know.
Okay, so how about we'll get an email. So be watching for your email on the instructions for how to make sure that you're set up for that. I know I get it, so I must have done it 8 years ago or whatever. In the organizational info, there are the budget committee guidelines that we've worked on that Vanessa was just referring to. For instance, it covers the procedure for filling a vacancy and other things like that. So that's just something that we've kind of developed. We can periodically review it and see if there's some procedures that should be defined. It's nothing like the school board policies manual, which is yay thick. It's just, you know, a few things to just kind of hopefully keep things moving smoothly.
And to answer your question, under settings, if you go to settings,
What is it? I'm sorry.
up to the settings, the cog up at the top next to the exclamation point.
No,
Over to the left.
Oh, there.
not the cog, the gear.
Okay,
Gear, sorry, gear.
Further up,
further up,
Over to the left.
this one.
next
Here.
One
one.
more.
One more.
Yeah.
Oh, settings. Oh, okay, yeah, okay,
In settings,
yeah.
there is a notifications on the left. And then you check off the email.
Get updates about Google Drive items in your browser, notify me about, and then all those things, and then done. Okay? Everybody got that? Thank you. Thank you very much. The other thing that is in the organizational info is this one, which is really important. Is it a meeting? One of the things that we have to do is we have to be attentive to the right to know law, which means that if you get an email, you should send out emails to budget committee members if you do one as blind copy, so that it's hard to hit a reply all. And if you get one, not to reply, not to have a conversation back and forth by email. Everything is supposed to be done in public. And it's also one of the reasons that we have email addresses with the SAU is because people can do a right to know request to see what we're saying to each other. So it's all public information. So this is kind of a little bit of a thing with the, is it a meeting? And kind of helps in a real quick way to see if you're in compliance with the right to know law, which is the RSA 91A2. So it's really about decisions being made and that kind of thing. So this is a really good, right to know is a really good thing to get familiar with. Does everybody know about right to know already? No? Okay. Okay. So it's just an important thing to know. In the planning for 23, 24, isn't that unbelievable? I mean, what? You know, there's a letter from the superintendent that he sent out in February having to do with information about moving grades 3 and 6, which is a real big thing that's going to be happening next year that the school board voted on. So this is about the analysis of some of the projections for enrollments, about how they're going to handle the crowds, how about the costs and what they're going to evaluate in the future and see how things go and that kind of stuff. I thought it was a really good letter, and I actually didn't see it until recently, even though it came out in February.
I didn't know it was in there. Somebody must have moved it in there.
I found it in my Google Drive, but it wasn't in the shared drive.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I think I created that share folder.
Yeah, I think
When I
so
was
too.
with
Because
the
I was,
agendas,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, right. I
Yeah.
was like, okay.
Okay.
Um,
Good, I'm glad some-
okay, so then here's the operations, which is the procedures that we had last year of how we operate and how we go through our year. And this is something that we can all decide on, but the RSA 32, which governs budget committees, says that we have two responsibilities, which is to prepare and present a budget and that basically fulfills the policies and goals of the school board, and secondarily also pays attention to the ability of the taxpayers to pay it. So our job is basically to be a check and balance, to say, does this do both things? And then all we do is we don't make any policies, and sometimes we get frustrated because we'd like to. And we also, we don't make any policies, and we also don't actually put a budget before the voters, except at the deliberative session. At the deliberative session, the voters who are present decide what the budget is going to be that's going to go to the voters in March. So the deliberative session is the first voting session. That's just people present, like an old town hall. And then the second one is the, the actual kind of voting at the booth. And whatever comes out of the deliberative session is the proposed budget. The school board sets the default budget. So it's either the proposed budget or the default budget. Is that all? Is this too basic? I don't know. The other thing that's in the RSA is that we have the right to ask for any information and documentation from the administration, and they have a need to give it to us. What we've had in this district over the last several years is a very great willingness of the administration to give us what we're asking for. There's not any holdback. We don't have to do right to know requests. We don't have difficulty. We don't have all kinds of kind of battling with one another to get information. As a matter of fact, they'll even create information for us to kind of consolidate things if they don't have an original document already. I've told Matt that I'd really like us to get the monthly revenue and expense reports. And he has put the last two in there so far, so we have them. I personally would very much like to get the fund status reports for all the various reserve funds. I know the school board just voted to spend some of the capital reserve fund. Is it capital reserve? No, it was a facilities use fund.
Yeah, the most recent spending was out of the facility use revolving fund.
Right.
So can you clarify for the new members, Annie, if they wanted information, how would they just go about doing that?
What we agreed to here, and it's in our guidelines, is that you go through the chair.
Okay.
I will not edit or change anything. I'll just pass it on. But the reason we go through the chair is to try and make it, this is one of the things where we try and cooperate with the administration. They cooperate with us, so we try and cooperate with them. And like when we get in all our questions on the budgets and stuff, what I'll do is I'll go through and I'll check the line items and stuff and see if they're duplicate questions and see if we can consolidate it into one that's amplified to cover all the aspects of anybody else. So that's why we do that so that then when the administration answers them,
Yeah.
they can kind of go through. So that's, yeah, thank you.
So the ones that you've just mentioned, did you just recently request those from Matt or were those
did.
previous requested?
I did.
Okay.
Years ago, we used to get them. And
Okay.
then we had all of these new budget systems and new bookkeeping systems. And then Matt was out sick for a while. And
Yeah.
I mean, it was just really hard to get accurate information. And I
Okay.
said, I think maybe it's time. So,
Okay.
the capital improvement plan, I know is something that we've talked about in these meetings. Well, with people who were here, but the need, Tom's big three, that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. So we really need to we need to get a copy of the capital improvement program as it's being done, because that's part of the budgetary thing. And then we need to kind of know, how money is being used to fund it. It might come in out of some of these special funds, or it might be end of the year money, or it might be requested in a budget.
So can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Just for clarification purposes. So you just requested some information from Matt. Will you share that with the entire committee?
Yeah.
Or is it just because you, okay,
Oh, no, it's
So you
in
will.
the shared drive.
okay.
It's
So
in
as
the
soon
shared
as,
drive.
but
Yeah.
I'm just saying, are you notifying us, hey, because nobody has those notifications, so we don't know that you requested it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
yeah.
So I just want to clarify. So like, if I have specific things that I want to request from Matt, I go through you. Are you going to notify other people that that information's being requested?
Mhm.
Okay, so we just did it on these ones that you did, but we are going to in the
Right,
future.
right.
Okay.
Okay.
I just
we're
want to
gonna-
make sure everybody's,
Okay, we're going to have,
Transparent.
what I want to ask, and anybody who has anything else they want to ask, but I want the monthly revenue and expense reports. There are two expense reports typically. There's one that's just health only, and then there's kind of everything else.
One of the things that the finance committee has asked for, that you might want to ask for in alignment with this, is a change of encumbrances month to month. So the expenditures tell you, this is my spending year to date, and this is what I have left over in unencumbered funds. And we've asked for a list of what are the big changes in the unencumbered funds month to month. Now
That's-
that would tell you where's the spending going.
Instead of having to go in there and kind of
So that
search
would
it.
be something else. Matt's still pulling that together, but I would think that'd be something else that you'd want in there with these other two documents.
I think that's great. I just made a note of that. Another one is line item transfers, to get notifications of line item transfers. And does everybody know what that is? Or so, okay. So if there's a transfer, that could mean that, maybe some money should be shifted in the next budget. Maybe not. Maybe it's a one-time thing. Yeah.
So I'm on the finance committee. I can certainly report out here the minutes of the finance committee meetings, because we usually have in there where the trust fund balances. We always have in there where there's any budget transfers. And another thing that we'll probably be looking for is all revenues that come in. So we don't the revenue reports that we have are the budgeted revenues. So all the different sources of income that are in the MC 27 or whatever it is. But there's also things that come in for revenues, like, for example, comes to mind is the boosters for hockey.
Yeah.
And so that doesn't come in the accounts that you see on a monthly basis. So that'd be something that I've talked to Matt about, but I really got to find out what else is there like that comes in these other accounts.
yeah, I'm certainly interested in the booster for hockey thing. I'm curious to see where that money goes and how it's spent and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
it comes in, he can show you the accounts, but it doesn't show up in the files that Annie just mentioned.
Okay.
It shows up in other accounts, so that we probably want to
That sounds
grab
great.
that too.
That sounds great. I think, how would you propose sharing that information, Jamie?
I could post it. You're the chair. I could send you my minutes. I don't know that I'll be doing the minutes, but I can send the minutes
Mhm.
that are generated. And then I can talk about them in the meetings, because I'll have been at that meeting.
Yeah, the thing that's weird about us is that we don't have any meetings between now and October, mid-October.
Yeah.
Unless there's a reason to have one. What we do is, this is another thing that we all agreed on it several years ago, and see if it works for you now. But we agreed that we would look at all current and past budgets between now and the end of September. submit any questions you might have, but get familiar with what's going on and what has gone on and what the history is, and look at the Q&As. So it's kind of a homework time over the summer. And then you get your questions in by September. It's late September. It's usually the 3rd or 4th week in September, and I'll send out a date. I then submit that, put those together, collate them and stuff, and I'll work with Courtney on that. And then we'll submit them to the administration, do any clarification with them that they need. And then typically the 2nd week in October, we have a meeting and get the answers. And Tom's method that he's asked us to use, that he's most comfortable with, is that he just reads a question, gives us an answer. We ask clarifying questions, but not probing questions. And if they're probing questions, then you submit those again on another question. And then I get those, put those together and get those to the administration. And the following week, they have another meeting where they do it. And we continue that process as long as we have to, till everybody's clear on what's going on. And then the first week in November, the superintendent, meanwhile, he's preparing with all his administrators and stuff. He's preparing his budget. So he recommends a budget to us and to the school board. And that's the first week in November. Then that second week in November, again, we go through a process, but now we're not on old stuff. Now we're on the new stuff. And that kind of prevents having gotchas and going back and visiting something and that kind of thing. It keeps us moving forward in kind of a coordinated way to fulfill the goal, which is to, fund education properly for the kids, without overburdening the taxpayers. So we use that Q&A and presentation format. And then when we're done with our questions, when we feel comfortable, when the school board feels comfortable, they make a recommendation of a budget to us. Meantime, we've probably been thinking ourselves. So we take the superintendent's recommendation, we take the school board's recommendation, we take our own thoughts and everything, and we prepare a budget. And then we work on that until we come up with one. Then we present that back to, we say, school board, we have a recommended operating budget. And the school board will either agree with it or disagree with it. If they disagree with it, then what we try to do is to negotiate something so that we can go to the voters and say, you know what, we feel comfortable together that we've done that. If we're not able to do that, then we go with ours and they go with theirs. It's just the way it works. They vote against ours or they vote for it or whatever, and we vote for our own budget. And the goal has been in the last few years to try and be as unanimous as possible so that we can keep the district moving forward. But if there's something not to be unanimous about, then that's the way it's going to be. So, it isn't, the goal is to accomplish education. It isn't to have unanimity. So that's, and then after that, once we have our budget, then
Just a clarifying question.
What?
I know the answer, but I don't know that anybody at home does or everybody does. What's presented at the deliberative is a budget committee's budget,
Yes.
regardless of a different vote or split decisions or what have you. It's
No matter what the
presented.
school board says.
Yeah, what's presented at the budget, at the deliberative is the budget committee meeting.
Right. And if
Or,
anybody,
Budget.
yeah. And if anybody has a disagreement or has a comment to make about it, then they are supposed to get up and go to the microphone and speak from the floor as a citizen, not as somebody who's presenting a budget. So it kind of keeps it clear what's happening. Then the next thing that we do once we have our budget is we prepare our presentation to be able to give it at the public hearing, first of all. And a public hearing is exactly what it says. It's a time where we listen to what the public has to say. We present the budget, we give that preliminary presentation, and then we listen to anybody in the public who has comments and other ideas that they might have about what the budget should be. Then we get together again and we say, let's change it this way or let's not, after listening. And then we finalize our presentation and do it at the deliberative session. Sign our, whatever form it is. I think it's an MS 25. I think it's 27, one of those. So we sign that and it goes off, and that's what tells the state, the budget committee recommended this, the school board recommended this, this is what, is coming forward. And then we're done for the year. So that's kind of the process. Does that make sense? Is there any questions? Did I confuse everybody?
Matt Angel, I just want to add, Matt Angel will come up. He'll finalize, it's Matt, right? That finalizes the actual calendar.
Yeah, once he, well, actually,
sit with you.
it isn't Matt.
Yeah.
What he does is he'll talk with us, with
Yeah.
Courtney and me.
Yeah.
He'll go through it with the school board, but it's mostly Department of Revenue.
Yeah.
Has to come up with their dates and times.
Okay.
The calendar really doesn't change substantially from one year to another because there hasn't been a reason to change it.
Yeah.
But the dates for public hearings and all that kind of stuff get established, and that's the finalized. And then Matt brings that to the school board, who then adopts it. And then we get to adopt it also.
Gotcha.
So,
And my recommendation is just something that I never got when I joined it. So just before we have different meetings and stuff, we can just do a quick outline with the new members. Hey, this is how it goes. This is what we're doing. This is the expectation. These are the do's and don'ts. You know what I mean? Procedurally and stuff like that, just for you guys. So you're not kind of just flying by the seat of your pants.
so I'd like to say that, Christine and Vanessa and I have been on, the board for a while, and we are very happy to act in any way as mentors, right?
Yeah.
Or, answer any questions or do anything. Feel free to contact any of us and, ask whatever you want, see if, and we can ask one another also, it's not like the learning curve stops. So, it's just, there's no kind of shame about not knowing everything.
Where does that cross with a public meeting?
What?
If I have a question for you or for Vanessa, where does that cross with a public meeting? If I send you an email and say, I have these questions, are we crossing that public meeting?
No, not if it's just you and her.
Just, okay, if it's a committee,
If it's everybody and everybody starts hitting each other back and forth,
okay.
then but if it's just you and her, there's no problem with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think the rule of thumb is 3, right?
Yeah. I mean,
Well, a quorum.
A
yeah,
quorum.
quorum,
A quorum.
right.
So we're made up of 6,
Eight.
7,
8,
8.
once we're full. Yeah.
Once you're full, it's 8, right? So you need 4.
4. Okay.
Good. Good
Ish.
point.
Can I ask?
And you understand that, Ken, right? Like the
Yeah.
quorum?
Mhm. Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Can I ask about the finance reports and how we're going to handle that? Because for me, having those monthly reports will be really good for me to review and on my own.
Yeah.
But is there anything that we need to do as a group? It sounds like we don't. And we're all
So-
okay with that.
What I can do is I can go back to the prior finance reports. I can post, if everybody turns on the settings, I can post them in the folder. And if anybody has questions, they can just direct send me whatever the question is. I'll be more than happy to answer it as best I can. That way, at least, there's not a waiting until the meetings start in October. We can get all that information from the finance committees that had happened in the past posted.
Well, there's a little bit of a balance with that, though, that, maybe, I think using you as a resource is really great, but it might be good when there's a question which is broad enough to share it, just a blind copy sharing. One of the things that troubled me last year with some of our Q&A was at the end, when Matt was taking individual questions from people, and then it was never aired in public.
You talking about the follow-up when they said you just follow up with Matt?
Yeah.
Well, I will say, and I'll be honest, now that we're talking about it, there's been a lot of information that I know that like you've requested in the past and others have that haven't been shared with the committee either. And I always have a problem with that. So if it's something that I feel is worthy to request, I want to make sure that you guys have the information too. Whether or not you choose to utilize it is completely up to any of the members. But
Right.
I think if something's being requested, I agree with you. It should be shared with the committee and that should stand for all of us. It should be consistent. You know what I
Yep.
mean? So.
So then what
Yeah.
I could do in that scenario is if I get a question, so it's one person just contacting me, I can answer the question to everybody blind copy because that's just an exchange of information. It's not a discussion. It's not anything else. And that way everybody would be privy to whatever the question was and whatever the information I had on that question was. I mean, I could do that.
And I would think that would be the same of anything that came through that you sent, that if I send it on to Matt or if I send it on to Tom. I mean, Jamie's a member of the committee, so that's a different thing. But, you know, if I send it on to Tom and then I could request that he, you know, reply, blind copy everybody.
I think that would be good.
That would be
Yeah.
good. That would
Yeah.
solve that.
And then it's up to us whether or not we want to review it. You know what I mean? But
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and then the other thing, Courtney, is that if you felt that there was something that we needed to get together to discuss, you can ask for a meeting. You know, I mean, we don't have to wait till October 15th, you know?
Fair enough. I wanted to make sure I understood.
Yeah.
If we're getting the reports, what are we doing with them? If it's just us on our own or whatever.
It has been people just doing their own homework.
That's
That
fine.
doesn't mean,
And there's, I mean, another suggestion is you guys use email a lot and that's fine. Excel is what it is, but if we wanted to try to keep track of who is asking what questions and if we keep seeing line transfers or something like that, we could have a tracker. I don't know. It's just something to consider.
have a
If-
what?
like a tracker of, we're talking about policies and procedures, but so in Excel, you can say, you know, on this date, Courtney requested whatever, and then you can have your response in there so that you can see. It may be good for catching trends, right? Like we're seeing that we keep pulling from one fund to another. It's just, again, I'm new, so I I can't say for sure if it'll even work. But instead of having like 50 emails with answers to questions, it might be helpful to have it in one place. But we can
See if we can't set something up like that. I'll be happy to see if we can't do that, Courtney.
Yeah,
Sounds like a good idea.
I'd like to see it in action.
Yeah. I have no idea how to do it.
Historically, one of the accounts that money gets transferred out of to cover other accounts has been health expenses. Recently, there's been shifting from special education accounts by school. So kids are moved or what have you, and the needs of a different school building changes. So, you know, debit middle school, credit Bakey, debit Memorial, credit middle school, whatever the case may be like that. But historically, the single largest area of movement has been from the health spending.
Another one that used to happen, and I bet it hasn't happened with COVID, was custodial overtime. Was a big one that seemed to move, not as big as health, but
Yeah, haven't seen that.
I bet we haven't
Lot.
because there's so much extra that's being done by the custodians. Yeah.
But that would all be in whenever there is one of those, we always have that in the minutes, but it's not in an easily sortable or trackable manner. It's, you just go look in and say, oh, it's this account again. Oh, there's another one. It's this account again.
Is there a simple way to kind of have a tabulation of those?
I believe Matt probably has a means to say, here's where my transfers were. He might actually have something that is just an accounting of transfers. I don't know if he does or not. I haven't asked that question, but he might. That would say, here's all the outas and here's all the intos that happen with all of our budget transfers during the year. He might have that already. I just don't know.
Okay, so I think that'd be a good one to
I can ask that at the finance meeting.
okay.
and just to add to this, sorry, I'm going to keep going.
No, keep
It
going.
also, if we have some sort of tracker that says like, you know, every year we're asking the same question, it can help us prepare. They can have that ahead of time for us, right? We're always asked, I can't think of a great example right now. It's late for me, but it can help so that we have what they're presenting to us answers some of those same questions that we always have. So I will try to put something together. I'm trying to sell it to you guys, but you don't even know what it looks like, but
Yeah, I'd have to see it in motion.
I think that's great. I mean, if you look through the old Q&As, and we went from like, I don't know, 200 a couple of years ago when we were starting with some of this new stuff to, I don't know, 100 or so, you know, I mean, it's gone down because we've had a lot of the questions answered that were, you know, pretty much what is this account about?
Yeah.
But if there's specific kind of, why did you have this spurt in spending? That's, you know, that's a different, that's kind of specific to that particular year. But looking at the old Q&As might be a real help to see if it's already been answered in the past. Yeah.
And it helps you kind of get used to what people look for in the budget process. You know what I mean? You'll find that like, you know, there's always a lot of questions that come up about health because there's a lot of, you know, negative numbers and stuff that go in there. And then you start to get, you understand that the answers are sort of consistently the same. You know what I mean? So you learn, all right, I got to move on from that. Now I'm going to look for drastic changes in accounts and stuff like that.
Does anybody, that's great. Really good input. Does anybody have anything else? Thanks, Jamie, for your, you know, help in giving us the stuff from.
Yeah,
you know,
from
the
my
school board.
perspective, there's no wall between the budget committee and the school board. It's all
Except
of our
when we say no.
responsibilities. Pardon?
Except when we say no.
Well, yeah, you can say, I don't want that. That's fine. But I mean, anything that's coming up in the school board that's related to budgets has to be available to the budget committee.
Right, right. Okay, so that's basically all I had for procedures and stuff. Goals, we still haven't talked about the goal of having the kind of training and mentorship. I kind of tried to do some of that, but you know, if do you think that setting up something on a more formal basis, or what do you think?
Tom said once we get the other position filled, that he would look into doing that.
Okay.
Like as the committee set up some sort of training for the entire committee. And I said, I would love to do the building tours, and because I never got any of that, you know what I mean, when I joined. So I said, I would love to partake in some of that. So
Yeah, the building tours are really,
yeah,
that's pretty good. And
I
okay.
mean, I've been fortunate to be in them, but it's important for you guys to see the facilities and, you know,
I think
I've seen them all.
one of the things that I always had a hard time doing was kind of like talking that like the MS-27 or the MS-25 or, you know, the 12B or things like that. All the stuff at the Board of Education that they put together with all their stats and data, as accurate or inaccurate as it might be from time to time, is based on the input from the district. And a lot of that comes from these forms, the MS-25 and 27 or whatever they are, and the 12B. And I know one year I just did a right to know with a whole bunch of districts on their 12Bs to kind of check and see what was going on in the reporting. I was just curious to see whether there was accuracy. Matt told me last year that he felt that some of the reporting that we'd done in the past on staffing was not accurate, that was on the 12B. So he's kind of revamped some of the systems in the district for their doing their reporting. So another thing that is in here, just so you know, is
Do you guys know who Matt is when we refer to Matt? Ken, do you know who Matt is?
I've never met him.
No.
I know who.
You know who he is? Okay. Courtney, you know who Matt is?
I do.
Okay, good.
this is another thing that I had asked Matt to do last year, and he did. And I don't think it ever got really, it got shared towards the end with the budget committee. But when Matt does an estimate for the tax impact of a budget, he puts together a form like this, which has all the revenue and the expected estimated revenues and all that kind of thing. And basically he comes down to the requirement that's needed. And that's when he goes through the membership and what portion of the school is Newton, what portion is Kingston. And the district agreement is that if Newton has 48% of the kids, then they supply 48% of the budget need, and Kingston supplies the balance. That way it's according to the proportion of kids. So that's something that's changed over the years. It used to be that Kingston had 55% and Newton had 45, and now it's almost 50-50. So, and yet the revenue base in Kingston is a lot higher than the base, the tax base in Newton. So it, you know, creates some tension. But one of the things that he has in when he does it is he came up with, find it, the estimate for the tax rates and so forth. And remember on the, I'm not sure where it is exactly in here, but remember on the ballot where it said estimated tax impact $2.11 or $1.95 or whatever it was. That's based on all of this. And it's just important, I think, for us to remember that when he makes that estimate, he assumes that there is zero money left over out of the existing budget at the end of the year. So if there's any money left over at the end of the year and the school board decides to give it back to the taxpayers as a tax credit, that will lower that estimate. So that's, you know, just something to know and to maybe be watchful of as we get to June 30th, see what the school board does. Again, we don't have any decision making on that.
Just for information purposes, last year, you're allowed to withhold 2.5% of the budget. And so last year, the board withheld 542,000. That will automatically go back. And then the board will be asked if they want to withhold 2.5% of any unencumbered funds from this year, so that you're also like holding that piece. So that is, that's part of the process. The next finance committee meeting, we're supposed to have our first good estimate as to what the unexpended, unencumbered funds are. So that's by the beginning of May, I should be able to get, this is what it looks like now based upon our current spending.
Is there anything major you guys want to knock out with that?
So there's, we talked about that at the last board meeting. There's still discussions on the track. The decision was made on the wireless at the last meeting. So the wireless is going to be put in, and there's quotes that are being looked for on the auditorium to update the auditorium. So these are the three that we've been talking about for the better part of a year. The wireless has already been appropriated, has already been agreed to and voted on. We're waiting on quotes on the auditorium, and the quote that we got from the vendor on the track was no warranty. And there was only one quote for $130,000 job. So the board had requested that we need to get other quotes. We need to contact other districts to see who they're using, and we need to get a warranty for the work. And Mr. Angel's working on those things.
Are they just covering it, skimming it?
Yeah, it's not a replacement. It's they do something. I don't, because there's going to be a dumpster. So I said, well, I thought this was just a coating. What are we going to dump? Sometimes they scrape the top a little,
Right.
then they put something down and then coat it. I'm not sure the full
They won't
details.
warranty it because they don't know what's underneath it.
That I think that is
That's
what the issue is.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, you guys probably have a hard time finding anybody that's going to
But-
warranty it.
And I think that's what's going to come up, but at least we should get that in writing. If there's numerous people that are saying, I'm not going to do that because, then we at least know
Why?
the due diligence
Yeah,
is done.
exactly. Yep.
But I think that's exactly where it's going to go, is I don't know what's underneath it. So you can't, I won't warrant that. And then the question is, can you at least warrant your coating? And I don't know anything about track. So does that not make sense? I don't know.
Yeah, the coating, I guess, so it won't chip off. What happens is they do this. They
Yeah.
create, because it allows water to seep through, but then water can build up underneath, and you can actually kind of run on a wave. The whole track will do this as you're running
You
on
get
it.
thrust heaves.
Yeah,
So it becomes a floating track?
yeah, literally. That's
Wow.
why Timberlane can't use their track for any track meets
Wow.
because of that problem, you know? So,
Wow.
Those are the three that I'm aware of. Of course, anything could come up. Last year, we got hit at the very end with the double Bakey boiler failures. So those are the only ones that I'm aware of.
But we have, 15 to 30, 16 to 30-year-old buildings, so, or 40.
It's Bakey is old. This one's 16 years old. So, you know, they're not all spanking new anymore. I mean, this one looks nice, but it's still aging.
This is the other bit of historical information that Matt had prepared. And basically his guesstimates of what the cost per pupil is, the student enrollments, the average class sizes, and the student teacher ratio. And then I also asked him to calculate a student to support staff ratio. I don't know if you remember, but there was kind of a mistake in a presentation that had been prepared that Tom gave, saying that the student teacher ratio was down to 8.5 to 1. And that was an inaccurate one. But
Is that report been updated though? Because I know we were still questioning.
it says verified ratio does not include K students. And part of it was that it's grades 1 through 12
Yeah.
is the thing. And so when one of the questions was, why is this number different than the total enrollment?
Yeah.
And that was it, because kindergarten's not included in the calculation.
Yeah. I'm wary of those because I remember enrollments have sort of changed from document to document. And then the teacher to student ratio, there was never clarification as to what teachers were included and what weren't included. You know what I mean? So I just want to make full disclosure.
Okay, so that would be something that would be good to include in, in that data.
Yeah.
Education is kind of what goes into these things.
Yeah. Yeah. Like if you're going to give me a student, clarify it for me.
Yep. The
Is
descriptions
your gym
are,
teacher considered a teacher? You know what I mean? Like,
and they are.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all the teachers are, any
Yeah.
professional staff are. But that's pretty important to really know what's going into it. It's like the cost per student, has a specific state formula, and it doesn't include data or transportation or food. So, but the staffing, it's interesting that, and again, subject to kind of looking at it, but our student teacher ratio is about 10.4 to 1 per estimate for the current year. And where we've really, with adding the paras, and this is for budgeted positions, not necessarily filled, because we know that a lot of the para positions still haven't been filled, but budgeted are that student to instructor support ratio is really going down because we're adding those intervention paras. So it's kind of important to keep an eye on kind of what's going on with the staffing and how we're doing it. Not trying to make you dizzy, but the cost per student is definitely going up.
Why?
Why is it going up?
The cost per student.
That's huge.
Yeah. So you got
Like in that 1 year, their estimate.
Okay.
yeah. So
In 21-22, it had a bunch of COVID money that was not, that was reimbursed and then was given back. So it was kind of weird, but I don't know.
you have to actually look at it. And
Middle school
I don't know what these are
alone,
based on.
Right.
Actuals are going to be different numbers because of when you can't fill it and the money goes back.
Yep.
Budgeted are going to be different numbers. And then the question becomes one of what's the delta in unfilled versus the unfilled 1 year versus the unfilled the next year. The other aspect of it that we know is a big piece of it, because I asked for a bridge last year from actuals to budgeted. And one of the big parts of the bridge is the contract. So the contracts are cumulative. So you had year one, I think, was about 460,000 on the professional staff contract. And year two was, I forget the number, 472 or something like that. But year two, the real number is, depending on comparison, you're up to 930,000 now from where it was before, because it's cumulative. But I don't know. We're looking up there at 3,000. I don't know what drove that 3,000. The 2022 estimate.
2020,
Yeah, the 2023 estimate is fully loaded with everything funded and assumes, to the comment that was made earlier, 100% of the budgeted dollars are spent.
Yeah.
Whereas those history numbers are incorporating what was given back, I think.
Mm-mm.
Those are all supposed to
No,
be.
that's all
budgeted
based on
numbers.
budget. Those are all based on budgeted numbers.
So it's not really actually, and that's, I always have a
I'd-
hard
yeah, I'd
time
have
with
to-
these
I'd have to verify
reports.
the
Yeah.
numbers. I tried to go through the other day from our reports and tie out budget, actual, and performance numbers. And I was having a hard time. I've asked Mr. Angel for help. I was having a hard time lining up the budget numbers, even going through the annual reports. There's, in 2019, there seems to be a glitch in the report. So I'm asking for some help on that. And then we'd have to look at what's going on with the students. I know we have, depending on if it's by school, I know we have a glitch going through, I forget which grade it's in, that we normally have 90 or so students and
Seven.
Six now.
there's
next
like
year's-
a 30,
Yeah, I think it's
30
yeah, it's-
student differential in this one class that's moving through the system.
That's
But I
next
don't know
year's.
where, I don't know exactly where it is right now. 7th, 8th.
I think it's sixth
It's-
grade.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's 6 going into 7th because I remember questioning. There was like 70 students and there's typically.
But
between-
that would be good to get that breakout.
Yeah.
As to coming with the drivers on that.
Well, we also had a glitch with lower kindergarten and preschool because of COVID.
Yeah, COVID.
So 2021 was very low. So, and those numbers also affect the student teacher ratio because that's the enrollment. If the enrollment is abnormally low because in this case, because of COVID, and then it goes up again, that changes the ratios and so forth. And that's one reason that you saw 21, 22 be a slightly lower cost per student because the COVID kids came back, some of them. And why it went up, from 19 to 22,000, we had a budget increase of about 3.5%. I don't know.
Can we get a
But
comparison?
enrollment's about the same. So I'd like a little explanation. Yeah.
Can we get a comparison somewhere of the local districts to our?
Other districts?
That's really hard, Ken, because there's a lot of weighing factors. I know what you're asking, but I'm just saying historically, there's a lot of weighing factors between districts. There's tax impacts, there's just so many different things that you can compare, but it's never like an apple to apple comparison. It's always like apple and oranges, you know what I mean? So we try to do like similar district sizes, but there's just so many things that weigh into it. So I mean, you can certainly do it, but I'm just mentioning, like, don't look at it hard and fast. Just,
Well, my concern is Fremont, that their contract's up in 2 years, right?
yeah,
Mm.
2025,
A few
right?
more, but the decision making will be up by that
In
point.
2 years, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
2
and-
years to tell you guys what they're doing.
When I was looking at it last year, the biggest complaint from Fremont was that we were one of the highest cost per pupil in the surrounding area. My question is, why would they want to stay with us if our cost keeps going up? Are we going up at the same percentage rate as everybody else, or are we pushing ourselves out of the market?
Is that, and I agree, but is that the number that you guys are giving to Fremont? That 20 grand for their high school students?
Fremont is over 20. I'd have to look up the tuition number.
And
that
that's
was
the number
posted.
that you give them?
Yeah, and that's what they have to pay. When Fremont is looking at, if you go to their website, if you want to go to their SAU, they have posted on that the proposals that they have in hand from Raymond, Sanborn, and Pinkerton. And if you look at the dollar values that each of them are saying, us and Raymond aren't too far away, but Pinkerton is significantly lower. And so one of the things that I believe the Fremont community would be struggling with is, all right, I have X amount of cost. And then what are the implications of having to go to Pinkerton versus having to go to Sanborn? And there's a lot of non-cost items that are in that equation, and how they'll end up weighing that remains to be seen. But that's where you could get that, Ken. The other place you can get, and Vanessa's right, you gotta be careful what you look at, but theoretically the state tries to get apples to apples as best that they can. And then they post that on the
BOE, the BOE.
The-
Department of Education.
DOE.
yeah, the
Yeah,
Department of
DOE
Education comparative website, and you
Yep.
can get
Yeah.
different information, but you have to be careful what you're looking at, because sometimes you can end up looking at, that's only an elementary school. That's not a full K through 12 offering. And then if you're just comparing them, thinking that it's the same, that doesn't really help. I know that I forget who did it. Somebody on the board sent something around of comparisons, working with Mr. Angel on it. I can search for that. But that's where I think the source is from, the DOE, because it's very hard to try to do it on your own, because the DOE excludes certain things for everybody. So they exclude busing, they exclude, I think,
Debt.
and they
and
take some
food.
things out to try and equalize it. But if you tried to do that yourself through direct questions to all the districts, you'd have to ask all those different pieces too.
And you can see that typically elementary is a lot more expensive in cost per student. At Sanborn, it's also true when you look at the DOE website, is that, elementary is high. I've seen some people post, on Facebook or whatever, oh, there's, this school with 45 kids and their cost per student is, this much money, and it's just K through 5, it's not a comparison. So it's just, you're absolutely right. The other thing I think is that it's just an indicator. It's something to look at. It isn't like something to be a decider. It's not something that guides your decision-making. It's just something that we need to be aware of. And particularly, as Ken said, when we're talking about Fremont,
Well, I think I remember that Fremont sends 176 students to the high school. Does that sound about right?
Just shy of 200, I think.
It's,
yeah.
it's higher than that right now, but that's in the neighborhood. It's in the ballpark.
Okay, so that would make a hell of a big difference on our attendance. I mean, I know we don't have to worry about it next year, but we got to be looking at that. What are we going to do to keep them?
it's a third of the high school.
Correct.
That certainly would be a lot of layoffs. It would be a disaster.
We are one community, and we'd like to stay one community with Fremont.
Yeah. It's been that way for a long time.
Yeah.
They split for a while and then came back. So, hopefully we can keep them. We'll see what happens. Okay, so I have some things that, and Courtney, you and I will talk and see if we've got the whole list of the things that we're asking Tom to prepare for our training here, to have a session. And then we'll schedule a meeting at some point, talk with him and schedule a meeting. At some point, it's typically a second or fourth Thursday. Is 7 o'clock good for everybody, or would you rather go earlier, or what do people want?
Whatever works for others, I'll do.
7 o'clock's easier.
7 works best for me because
Yeah.
I see clients all day. so-
Yeah, I was gonna say 7 works good for me.
Okay, I just want to,
Earlier,
Everybody a
it gets
chance.
into a gray line of like
okay.
what kid is where. and-
Yeah, okay, so second or fourth Thursday, and I'll aim to have him do it in May. If we could do that. So
Okay.
we'll put that together, and then we'll communicate with you all and let you know the date and so forth. Let's see. And also, I think what we'll do too is we'll put together our list and then send it back for feedback with not a reply all, but if there's something that we've missed that you want to have included in the training,
Oh,
okay?
Yeah.
So that we can cover it. Okay, so then if that's over, then we can talk about secretary options. What are your thoughts?
I think we should put an ad out there. I don't think we should wait for a student.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we should put an ad out there. He got a lot of response the last time he put an ad out there, so maybe we can get some more. That would be my suggestion, because I felt like we were kind of scrambling last year, and I mean, my notes are going to be terrible, so. Just
Not
saying.
necessarily.
I'm just saying.
Um,
That would be my preference. I'd rather, we have a budget. I mean, they can budget for it, so I'd rather just pay somebody to do it.
Yeah, we've got enough to pay somebody a fairly decent wage for maybe 4 hours of work 8 times a year or
Yeah,
something.
something, yeah. That would be my preference.
Okay, so an ad would go,
Interview and everything.
what?
Okay. Sorry, I was just asking if we interview.
Yes.
Yeah.
We ask for interview, people who are willing to interview. You know, usually it's not the whole, the whole committee.
Okay.
So, I mean, we can do it any way you want to, but
I just had my hand up. I'd rather you two figured it out. Like, honestly, the secretary isn't, the whole board doesn't need to vote on that. If you two are happy, or even just Annie, I'm fine with it. It's just somebody taking notes.
right.
So it's pretty easy interview, right? I don't think we need to meet and have interview rounds and stuff like that to hire a secretary. That's my opinion. If everybody's different, that's fine, but.
Well, and last year, our chair got COVID, so he didn't do the interviewing. That's why it didn't happen. And then everybody wasn't available by the time it was able to happen. But yeah, we can
Should
put
vote
an
that
ad
nobody
in
can
and
get COVID.
see.
Yeah.
Like-
Check.
Okay, so that's what we'll do. And we don't have anyone from the public. So committee comment. Anybody, free for all, anybody have any comments?
I learned a lot from your explanations tonight, Annie.
Oh, good,
Yeah.
good.
All right, I have a couple of comments. I don't know if you're done. I do just want to emphasize, I know that there's a couple things, there's a little bit of a learning curve with the budget committee, so just don't get discouraged for you guys. I mean, you guys all have budget experience, so I think it'll be good. I think it's important to communicate with your chair if you're going to be missing meetings. I know that there were a few meetings that were missed last year. I think it's a commitment that you make. And I did have some concerns with the amount of meetings that were missed last year. So just full disclosure, I just wanted to mention that. And, I welcome you guys. I look forward to working with you. I think we're not always going to agree on our opinions, but I want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to express their opinion. We always talk about things thoroughly, always second motions when people make them. Give everybody the opportunity to discuss things is very important. And at the end of the day, just be civil with each other, understand that everybody comes from a different set of shoes or a different place, and we're all working for a common goal. So I look forward to working with you guys.
Sounds good, thank you. Anybody else? Okay. So we're looking at the next meeting date will be hopefully either the second or the fourth Thursday in May. And we'll put together, kind of our thoughts on what we came up with for the thing. We'll send the list out, give feedback if you have anything that we've missed, and then we'll set it up with Tom for the training.
So just the second is the budget committee. It's the interviews.
Okay.
So just the 12th is probably,
What time is the interviews?
I think they're at like 5:30 or 6 or something, but it depends on how many we get too.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
you know what I mean? So I'd probably
Okay.
rather not do something on that day. I'm just mentioning.
Yeah.
So if
okay.
you look at the 3rd or the 4th or something, I'm just throwing it out. there,
Okay,
but-
typically we don't do the third because, the school board is the first and third, and that's hard on, some
Oh, yeah,
people.
because Tom wouldn't be available either. So, yeah.
Well, we're on a Thursday.
Yeah.
School board's on a Wednesday, but it's kind of tough on the administrators to have 2 late nights
Yeah.
in a row because they get up early, believe me.
Yeah.
I'm up early when I go into school. So,
But yeah,
um,
I just don't want to landlock you into one date. You know what I mean? Just
yeah, okay.
throwing it out
So
there.
what's the fourth?
The 4th is the 26th.
25th. So that's just before Memorial Day, right?
26th, yeah. Yeah, that is Memorial Day weekend.
But not Thursday night. I mean, Thursday, you can take a long weekend?
I'm not saying me personally,
Okay.
but I just don't know for other people. You
Would
know,
the
if they take a long
24th of
weekend.
May work?
26th.
20,
Are you looking at Thursday?
yeah, Thursday,
The 26th.
the 26th?
Mhm.
Okay. Would
Yep.
that work?
Sure.
I don't think we really know right now, so
Okay. Okay. I mean,
tentatively,
setting-
let's put it out there for that.
Yeah.
Okay, at
If
this
you get
point,
a lot of people and you're not gonna have a quorum, then we'll reschedule it.
it'll be either the 26th of May or the second week in June. So, we have to also look at Tom's schedule. So we have to see what's going on with that.
Yeah, because that's a graduation on Friday too. So just again,
Graduation is what, on the 27th?
the second week, the second week in June,
The
the
10th, I
10th.
think.
Oh,
It's graduation.
that
Yeah.
stinks.
Yeah.
That's not going to work.
Yeah. So I'm just like,
Okay.
I
So we
live
may
and die
have to
by
go
my
with the
calendar.
first and the third. We'll look at options with Tom.
yeah.
Okay.
Third Thursday doesn't,
What?
try to send out a date. The third Thursday doesn't really work that great for me, but
Okay.
I have other things. But is there if we're not meeting again until that was like September,
October,
October.
mid-October. Yeah.
do we want to do training and then not meet? Like, is it worth having a training and then not have to use it for 3
I
months?
see
Or
what you're
just
saying. So you think that
Yeah.
the training should be scheduled for like September?
when we're about to do it?
I get it.
Is
I think that
thought.
makes more sense actually.
I agree.
Yeah. Because then it's fresh in your mind.
like a tour? Sure, we can do a tour.
But even that, I think should wait until September-ish, even August for the tour. But the training should be September.
Okay. My response to that is that I would rather think that we are working on using the information on our own after we get trained on what the information is and what the sources are and what the data points are, so that you're using it through the summer. I don't think that, if you wait till you do a training in early September or mid-September, and then you have your questions in on the budget, on all the past budgets and all the past stuff, and you haven't done your homework before then, you're just using your training in 1 week. That's going to be pretty inefficient.
I agree with you, Annie.
Yeah.
That to have more time to absorb the information and use it.
But are we going to be, so maybe I misunderstand what the purpose of this training is,
Okay.
because
Let's talk about what it is. Okay.
yeah, so if we're going to talk about what the budget allocate, what am I trying to say? If we're just talking about how we develop the budget and what the allocations are, I don't know if we need, I'm thinking it's gonna be on the budget process more than the allocations. Like, I think we all have experience with the budget, so I'm not sure if we were gonna get into that level of detail. For me, going line by line, I'm gonna have to spend some time on that. I'm not sure having someone, I guess I don't understand what the training is, whereas I would prefer, in my opinion, if I learn it in June, when it comes September, I'm going to be like, what was that again? Like, I feel like to me, this is a weird gap. That's a really long time to not meet. So that's just how I learn. But
Okay, so if we were to have meetings, what would you want to have the topic on? I mean, what is it that you'd like to cover in a meeting? Kind of questions that you have about past budgets, or?
probably like just on, I would think like, okay, so he gave us a school board report. I would think a finance report, just so we can understand. I guess it happens all at once. There's different ways. There's so many different ways of doing it, right? For me, I would, on some more frequent basis, want to check in on the health of the current budget. I know that the finance committee does that, but I also feel like as part of the budget committee, I want to have
Okay.
my finger on the pulse of how it's going. I'm not suggesting at this point that we like totally mess with the system. I'm just saying I'm not really sure if I'm going to retain everything for the September timeframe. If we do it in May, that's just when it comes to the budget process.
Yeah.
Jamie, when is the budget finalized with the expenditures and everything like that? Do you know what I mean? When you get the final, how much last year cost?
Oh, yeah, that's August
Yeah.
or September earliest.
Yeah.
So us meeting before in talk, I see your point, like, okay, so we don't even know what they spent. And we're gonna start building a new budget. But they don't know what they spent until August, and you want to see that. That's what you want to look at, right?
But-
Is what last year cost.
So if I could, there's a number of different things that I think are in play here.
Right.
So one is just a training as to what are the rules for members of a budget committee. right? I think this is what you're
I
talking
think,
about.
yeah, I don't know the details of the training because it hasn't been discussed.
Probably
but
going to bring somebody in to do right to know
Yeah,
training, which would be beneficial to know as soon as possible because it's easy to step your foot into something that you don't want to be stepping your foot into.
yeah, I don't know if it was,
So, and then there's the tours.
yeah,
And then there's the pulsing of what's going on with spending, which I think is what you're after.
I think, yeah.
And you could set up different timelines. If we wanted to meet to pulse where the data is, then it might be good after a finance committee meeting to have a meeting to say, this is what the most recent encumbered are. This is the information as to what the projecteds are. You could do something like that if you wanted to. But probably be best, again, my opinion would be probably be best if you two say, what do we want to, just what you're asking, what do we want to cover when? And then just send out notes as to this is what we'd like to do. And as a chair and the vice chair, you can call the meetings
yeah.
and then we'd come to them. But I think there's a lot more than just a training statement being made here. There's I think
Yeah.
all four of those pieces.
Yeah, I think you're right. The right to know, the tours, that's a whole different thing, and that can happen basically at any time. Then another one that you didn't refer to just now, but we talked about were kind of the reporting forms
Yep.
and what they are and how they're used, and therefore what goes into some of these calculations we find on the DOE. That seemed like one that came up, and I think, in my opinion, that would be better sooner because you can get it into it and stuff. The pulsing of kind of going through and reporting on what's happened and where the spending is and stuff. The preliminary data, I mean, the audited data is available in August or September, but the preliminary data is available pretty quick in July. I mean, June 1st,
Well,
June 30th.
so COVID messed us up, and then Matt was out last summer that messed us up. So theoretically, the year closes on June 30th. And then you give, your normal annual closing, et cetera. So theoretically, the information would be available in July. We haven't seen it in July for a number of reasons the last couple of years.
Mhm.
So it's pushed into August or, beginning of September. But theoretically, the data should be available by then. It's usually in the July timeframe when the warrant article decisions as to the reserves transfer funds,
Mhm.
because that's all part of how much is left over at the end. And then it's
It's
usually,
actually June. It has to be done before June 30th.
I thought the interview.
it has to be done before it's distributed.
Okay. Okay.
So sometimes it's done, the posting is made in July, even though it's been accounted for in June in the books.
Okay.
So that's, Matt could probably say better as to how quickly could he have that, but it's within the realm of possibility that it could be mid-July. But I know that a lot of people in administration also take some vacation in July.
Yeah. So then
So
August.
I'm just not sure.
In Massachusetts, we had 15 days in July to clean up the records before we started closing things out. Bills come in late. You buy something in the middle of June, you may not get the bill until second week of July. So that's been encumbered, but you don't pay it until you get the
Right.
bill. So,
Yeah.
he's got to have at least 3 weeks, I would think, before he can say, I've got all the bills that I'm going to pay. Now I know what's left over.
Yeah.
Um,
And when we get the monthly reports, there'll be a month end report that says kind of, and as Jamie said, asking what the differences in the encumbrances are, but what bills are you expecting? What do you think are coming in? How much money in our budget is actually left over at this point?
In June, we'll have a very good estimate
Mhm.
as to what the end of the year unencumbered looks like. And then to the question that you asked, and then what about these other things that we're trying to do? Okay, well, here's my unencumbered. Here's the $542,000 coming back. Here is the what I still want to do and encumber, so I can write a PO before the end of the year and encumber it. And then here's what I'm estimating is going to be the amount that is unencumbered that is intended to go back to the taxpayers. That initial estimate we'll get in May, and then by June, it'll be fairly close. It'll be a good estimate to use for planning purposes.
So what I'm hearing is that maybe it'd be a good idea to schedule like a monthly meeting. One in May, one in June, one in September. No, I'm saying
No, I think we can,
to go over these pulsing things. Is that something that you're
I
hearing?
think that he's gonna upload some of this stuff on there. I think at the end of year will be I would suggest that if we have some sort of report for hey, this is what we actually spent. To me, I would like to review it with someone. I don't know if you guys find it useful. So maybe we can wing it, or I don't know if winging it's right, but we can consider a meeting once we have some of those final numbers. I think for the training, I was thinking it was going to be about the budget process, which you gave us a high level overview and what's needed at each step. But if you want to discuss the reports that Jamie and Matt are going to provide, we can meet for that as well. I just think I maybe misunderstood the intent of the training.
Okay.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, I, again, like I said, I didn't talk to Tom. I think the intent of the training was not just right to know. I think it was more an outline of the whole budget process and to go over that. I suppose, I could certainly clarify it with Tom. I mean, I'd like to condense, if you guys are looking at meetings, for right to know and to understand allocations. I mean, I think we could probably condense that stuff into one meeting. I don't think, having meetings every month, you know what I mean?
I'm trying to, yeah.
Yeah,
right,
is, would just be viable during the summer months and stuff like that. I
Not
mean,
summer, no.
yeah, well, I mean,
Not
even
July.
you're talking June and you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
there is just a lot of stuff going on out there. So I have a very busy life. So that's the only reason. I just don't want to be the one that's missing all the meetings if there's important things going on. So
What-
just something to take into consideration.
So if we're saying, I know summer months but if we have a good idea in June or July, maybe we just pick one month where we have a close or a good idea of what the final numbers are, and we can do the training, because we're trying to fit it in the next month, right? So it seems like every date we suggested, there's something going on in the school year.
Right.
So as another option, maybe we can do a poll or something. I don't know. Maybe try to combine when we have a better idea of what the final numbers are. That's my suggestion, but I will do whatever.
Well, we had
Fits for everyone.
difficulty finding a date with, for
So
May. We had
Annie, why
difficulty.
not, when Jamie thinks he's got a close number, send an email out to everybody with, you pick 4 dates, send it out to everybody, and then let them reply to you with the dates that they can show up for, and you formulate it that way.
Okay. And wherever we can get a quorum, we do
That's
it.
right.
We as a committee so concerned with the final numbers. We have no control over that.
No, we don't.
We're concerned with next year's budget. The final numbers are history.
Mhm.
We can see that they put a lot of money in this account and not spend it and then move it over here.
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking at, is where is the money being budgeted and where is it being spent? But that's what I'm looking at for the next budget. The historical budgets will tell me they've been using this account as a catch-all account. They transferred money other places. Why are they doing that? That's a question I'd have for the upcoming budget. If the final numbers don't really affect us at all, because we have no control over any of the spending. Once we approve the budget, we're out of the process. That's the school board and the finance committee, right? They're the ones that are going to make the decisions on what's transferred, what isn't.
Well, one of the things that I always check as a school board member that I've always checked is what is the actual spending? And the reason I want to know that is I've seen the budget processes through 40 years of work, and you keep budgets high very often so that you can come in below the budgets and be a hero or what have you, at least in the business world. And it's interesting always to me to say, what are we actually spending? Because you'll see questions every year about, well, how does this compare to the actuals? And the answer that you get back is often, well, we look at it budget to budget. Well, I appreciate that. I do that too, but I also look at actual the coming budget because I want to know what is the differential. And what I'm used to from a business perspective is I want somebody to be able to build me the bridge and walk it through. So if you looked at last year's budget, last year's spending were about $34 million. This year's budget was 37. That's more than the 3.6%. That's budget to budget. What are those differences? And I asked for the bridge to outline those differences. And the differences really come out to be, well, there's about $1 million in contracts because this is a 2-year spread between your actual and your budget. There's about $1 million in contracts. And then there's, I forget the numbers, so I won't say the numbers. I know that one.
It was about $1 million in COVID.
Well, and then there was the inability to fill positions. So there were budgeted positions that weren't filled.
Yeah.
And so, and then you could see what are the big ticket items that drove that. And you say, okay, well, that was an allocation that didn't happen that we still want to allocate.
Yeah.
Or you might say, well, wait, that allocation didn't happen. We survived. Do we really want to have that allocation or not this coming year? So I do use that, but I think that for that purpose, the estimates that we'll get in May will probably suffice. Because you don't need, to your point, you don't need it to a gnat's behind
You can't control it.
to see what that trend is going to be in the comparison.
Yeah. And we do, part of the process that we do is the prior year budget analysis. So
Okay.
when is it typically in July or something that they send it? When did they send that? I'm just trying to think.
The prior year
Yeah,
budget,
yeah.
um,
When do we submit our questions by?
by the end of September.
Okay.
So, and that's on the current budget and all past ones.
Yeah.
Anything that's history.
Yeah. So even though the money's already spent and allocated out there, we'll do review it. And then what I look for there is, what was budgeted for such and such that I felt like was a hot topic item for the district. Did we budget accordingly? Are we still struggling there? You know what I mean? So that's how I look at the budget, and just a little bit of a different respect, but we do go through it and you have the opportunity to ask questions about it. And it sort of feeds into the coming budget in terms of,
You're still budgeting that amount of money when you didn't spend it last year.
yeah, you didn't spend it, like, are there things that you're not budgeting appropriately? You know what I mean? And if you can't fill these positions and, so I'm not explaining it very well, but
No, I think you really are. I think it's good. And I think another thing too is that the past 2 years, we obviously had COVID impacts. This year is the first year of normal operations in 3 years. So it's going to be really good to look at what the actuals are and the estimates at the end of the year. It's going to give us a much more sane picture of the district. We still have unfilled positions, but it's going to be more sane than it has been the last 2 years.
so I sort of agree with you that it would make sense to coincide that before the budget process, but not too far before. But you know what I mean? I don't know, at least that's how I think, because then that information that I have is really still very fresh in my brain as I'm, analyzing the prior year budget and so on and so forth. That's really fresh for me if we wanted to have a meeting at that point to discuss a lot of that.
And I guess my other piece is that I'm assuming that's around that time, they're going to have a conversation on certain decisions and why they were made. And while we can talk about it in September, this is why we spent the money the way we did. And it's at the end of the year and you hear it when it happens. And then I have more than 3 weeks to think about it or whatever it is to submit questions.
Okay, so you're basically, and I think Dan was saying this too, basically looking at maybe late August when school starts.
Yeah.
And we've got this information to kind of go over it and to get some of the outline of some of those things and have discussion about it, and then be able to ask questions after that.
I think that would be my preference. But if I'm the only one that wants it, I can go and do it on my own. Like it's just.
No,
How-
we're a committee, so let's figure it out. How does everybody feel? Do you think an August meeting would be helpful?
I'd be fine with it.
Okay. So at this point, I'm going to talk to Tom about tours and make a couple of options available that you could do a tour.
Yeah, you might have a couple days you could do it too. You know what I mean? To
Yeah.
maximize everybody that
Right.
wants to do it.
Right, yeah. I'd really like to have the explanation of the reporting forms and how they're used and how they get applied in in the DOE, I think might be helpful to us, but is that just me or does anybody else kind of feel like you want more?
Well,
information?
you just showed some reporting up there that was very impactful. Also with the student ratios, so it would be good. I have asked for that also, so if they're going to be putting it together, might as well have everybody see it at the same time.
Is that what you're talking about? I don't think that's what
I
you're
was
referring
talking
to.
about what goes into those components and where the sources of information are and what the forms are and that just kind of understanding the reporting process.
I'm
And
presuming the Excel spreadsheet is directly coming off from those DOE forms.
Yes. Yeah. And Matt did his estimates based on the way that the DOE does theirs for the future, because one thing I didn't mention is that DOE comes out with all that information, but they don't come out with it until December or January. And that's for the prior year. So that's why I asked Matt, what's the estimate?
Yeah.
Of how it should be done, and where we probably stand at this point.
Yeah.
And I think we can get that updated, but that's just, I don't know.
I think it'd be helpful to reach out to Tom to figure out what the training that he's talking about entails.
Mhm.
Because if it's all of that and procedural and stuff like that, I don't know if it would make more, you know what I mean? Just when it would make more sense to have that.
And the other thing I think that Jamie mentioned was the kind of basically an accounting of filled versus unfilled positions. So we understand where the gaps are right now versus what's been budgeted and what isn't filled. And I think we all know there are a bunch of paras that aren't filled, but I'm not sure if there are other things. So
Some at the end of the year, some
I was going to say there's
teachers were
resignations.
hired to cover some of the para positions because we couldn't get the para positions with the pay matrix that existed at the time, and with everything else going on, we weren't able to hire them. So we did actually pick up some teacher positions to fill that gap. That was probably in the spring, like I guess winter, February-ish time.
okay. Okay, so that's what we'll do. Is there anything else anybody has, or? Then I'm going to adjourn us.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.